Okay, I hope you can see my screen. You can see the screen? Nope. Okay, let me try it again. Or did I lose you? Okay, can you see my screen now? I don't hear anyone. Can you hear me? Uh, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I wasn't talking to myself. Okay, and you can see the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Be strong and of good courage. And let's go forward here. Okay, and again, as I say again, is that if you have any questions, please stop me and let's talk about it. And hopefully we can have a good conversation. Lesson objective is to understand that we have nothing to fear but fear itself when we follow the commands of God. And the scriptures, from your scriptures, Joshua 1:1-9, Proverbs 3:6, and Isaiah 58:11. Okay, the main scripture being Joshua 1:1-9. As a form of introduction, the phrase, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, was said by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the 32nd president of the United States, in his first inaugural address on March 4th, 1933. And he used it to inspire hope and courage during the Great Depression. He's the only president of the United States that served 4 terms. And he served president during World War II. This phrase, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, is applicable today because we, even as Christians, sometimes are afraid to go outside of our comfort zone. And so we tend not to follow God's commandments because we are afraid to do it. We're unlike Abraham, who followed God's commandments because he had faith in God. And sometimes we don't actually demonstrate that faith. Now, of course, we need to think about what are we afraid of. And some of us say that we're big and bad and bold, and we have nothing to fear. But the fact of the matter is that we all have fears. I mean, I don't like heights. I do not like heights. So even though I want to ski and learn to ski, I would never ski because I'm not going that high to come down. Now, I don't mind going in a plane, but I'm not going to go heights where I can look down and see below me. That's my fear. But we all have fears. And we have to understand is that we have to face those fears sometimes if we're going to follow the commandments of God. Joshua 1:1-6. Can I get someone to read that? Can someone read that?
Joshua 1:1-6. After the death of
Okay, maybe not. Maybe I need to do it for technical reasons. I'll do it. Okay. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land that I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. So God is talking to Joshua. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Verse 5 says, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you, nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. That's, again, God talking to Joshua. Now, a couple of things. God made a promise to Joshua, and God provided words of encouragement. God made a promise to Joshua, and he provided words of encouragement. Now, before we go forward, let's back up a minute. And I have a question. I need somebody to answer me. When you're in school, and anyone can answer this, but when you're in school and the professor is talking and you're taking notes, how do you know what to write and what not to write? Someone tell me, what do you use as a basis for deciding what's important enough to write about and what's not so important, and you really don't write it down? Anyone? I know you're in school, so what do you take notes?
Finally, I jot down what is applicable to me.
Okay.
That's how I know what to write and what not to write.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, right. What's applicable to you? Someone else?
Praise the Lord.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. For me, I would probably jot down things I don't know before. I haven't heard before. I haven't taken note of before. Something new. That's one.
Okay.
And two, from the intonation or from the emphasis, I
Okay.
can know if that's really important for me to note
The
down.
emphasis. Now, how do you know something's emphasized?
Repetition.
Oh, good answer. Good answer. Give him a handshake. Tell him a good answer. Why did I ask you that question? Be strong and courageous. How did God repeat that to Joshua? Or did he only say it once? Somebody answer me. Did God only say it once, or did he repeat it?
Severally.
I'm sorry, say again? He repeated it at least 3 times. He said it in Deuteronomy, and he said it in Joshua chapter 1. Be strong and courageous. If God said it more than once, just like your instructor in school, it must be important. And you need to write it down. And where do you write it down? You write it down in your heart. Not on a piece of paper that you may lose, but you write it down in your heart, because it is important. Our entire existence, our entire life is based on certain foundational things that God says. One of those foundational things is that God loved the world with all his, God wants us to love him with all our heart, mind, and soul. Christ said that more than once. Christ said to love, said it more than once. Foundational. And be strong and courageous is foundational. We have to put it into our heart, and so everything that we do is based upon that foundation. Said more than once. Now, what promise did God make to Joshua? What promise did God make to Joshua? He said that wherever you step, you're going to be victorious. God made a promise to each one of us. You, me, we may not necessarily know what that promise is. We may still be trying to search for it, although I kind of think I know. But he's made a promise to each one of us, just like he made a promise to Joshua. And then he also provided words of encouragement. Words of encouragement. What did he say? He said that I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will never leave you nor forsake you, is what he said. He says the same thing to us today. He's never going to leave us or forsake us. That's God's promise to us. And that's our encouragement, that he's with us always. Joshua 1, 7-9. Again, the same word, same phrase. Be strong and very courageous. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you might be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. God has repeated that phrase again. Be strong and very courageous. And then he also says that wherever we go, he will be with us. Back to what we said earlier. He will never leave us or forsake us. But there's something that goes along with that. It says, meditate on the book of law day and night and follow the law of God. So we have a promise, but it comes with certain conditions. We have a promise, but it comes with certain conditions. Any questions there? Now, there's some expectations, some conditions that comes along with this promise. God expects Joshua to keep his commandments. He expects him. I mean, he didn't say you could or you couldn't. You decide whether you will or won't. He said, you will follow the laws that I gave Moses. I'm not changing them because Moses is dead. The law is the law. And God expects us to keep his commandments. Going back to what we said earlier, God has made a promise to each one of us. He has promised to never leave us nor forsake us. But he expects us to keep his commandments as a condition of that promise. B, God expects Joshua to meditate daily on the instructions from God. Meditate daily on instructions from God. Not unlike the verse in the New Testament, it says, pray without ceasing. Same. Meditating daily. We are to keep our mind on God always. Or keep our mind or our spirit in a frame of mind that whenever we hear something from God, we know that God is talking to us. Now, yes, we're doing a lot of things throughout the day, studying in school or working on a job, but you always have your mind and spirit open to hear what God has to say. And you always keep God's law on your heart so that you know how to make better decisions. But it says clearly, he's never going to leave us. He's never going to forsake us. He's going to be with us. We've already victorious, but expectations come with that. To keep the commandments, not my commandment, not your mother's commandment, not your father's commandment, but God's commandments. And to meditate on those feelings. And third, but not less important, is God expects Joshua not to be afraid. He expects that out of him because he's telling Joshua, don't be afraid. Be strong. Be courageous. Do not be afraid. There's no need to be afraid. See, fear comes from something that we don't know. Fear comes from the unknown. You know, if you're in the dark and you hear noise, you might get frightened. And why do you get frightened? Because you can't see what you hear. But you hear something, and there's an unknown. There's an unknown. But when we have God on our side, we know that we're safe. We know that we're safe. We don't have to be afraid. And God is saying to Joshua, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Be strong and be courageous. That's what God is telling each one of us today. Okay. Those of you who are graduating, okay, you have finished one part of this journey, and you're going to enter another part of the journey. The other part of the journey, you may not know. You're not sure. You may or may not have gotten a job already. You may have decided, I'm not quite sure I'm ready. I want to get additional education, or I may want to move to another country. These things are uncertain for you. But just because they're uncertain don't mean you need to be afraid. Because know that wherever you are and wherever you're going, God is with you. Always. Because he said it. He will never leave us nor forsake us. Now I have a question. What do you think would have happened if Joshua had failed the expectation? If Joshua had failed to keep God's commandments, if Joshua had failed to meditate daily on instructions from God, and Joshua acted like he was afraid and act on his fright, what do you think would have happened? Anyone?
Hello, sir. The promise will not be binded.
Ah, say that again.
The promise will not be binded.
All righty. Amen. Amen. Again, God promises us, but he expects us to meet certain expectations. And if we choose not to, then all the blessings that we have in store from us, we're not going to get them all. Now, there's some things called conditional blessings, some things called unconditional blessings. But I'm talking here is the conditional blessings. We all have conditional blessings. God has something already in store for you, something already in store for me, and I've just got to do the right thing to get it. And if I choose not to, then I don't get the blessing. Just that simple. And the expectations are easy. When I say easy, I mean they're very clear. And, you know, sometimes you get instructions and you're not sure about what they mean, what they say, you know, maybe in a different language, or maybe some words in that instruction that you really don't understand. You know, your vocabulary is limited. Well, this isn't one of those cases. This is very clear. Very clear. Keep God's commandments, meditate on him daily, and don't be afraid. That's clear. Very clear. Now, understanding that if Joshua had not done what he's supposed to do, God's plan still would have worked. God would have just chosen someone else. Just wouldn't have been Joshua. But we don't want God choosing someone else when he wants us to do it. Because we want the blessing that God has in store for us. And if we don't follow God's commandments, we will not get that blessing, and that blessing will be given to someone else who does. Do we understand that?
Yes.
Again, God's will be done. It may not be done by me because of my hard-headedness or my failing to keep his commandments, but his will be done, and the person who does his will be blessed. That makes sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now, if you remember the story of Deborah asked her leader of the army to go fight. And he said he would not go fight unless she went. And she says, well, I'll go, but understand is that the reward that you were going to get, I'm going to get now. That's exactly what we're saying here. Proverbs 3:6. Proverbs 3:6. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. What are the factors that cause us not to submit to the instructions from God? There are a couple of them, several of them, but I listed three here. One is the fear of failure. We are so afraid of not being successful that sometimes we do nothing. And by doing nothing, we get nothing. We are afraid of it. God says, do not be afraid. Be strong, be courageous. Now, Joshua could have stayed on the side of the Jordan River where he was, because he was afraid he wasn't going to be able to win the battle. But he didn't. He crossed the river Jordan and took over the land that God had prepared for him, because he was not afraid of failure. So don't let anything get in your way that is going to cause you not to get a blessing from God because you are afraid. And fear comes in a lot of ways. Fear comes in a lot of ways. Okay. So let's make sure that we are not afraid, that we stay strong and courageous and do what God has asked us to do, and follow his commandments. And then sometimes our ego can get in the way. And I feel like edging God out. You know what ego is? Everyone has an ego. Everyone has an ego. And I'm not saying that having an ego is bad. I'm not saying that. But you got to be very careful. Because sometimes we think we know when we don't know. And our ego gets in the way. You know, there's a man named Benjamin Franklin who decided he was going to come up with the 12 things that if he did, he was going to be a good guy. You know, and he listed all 12. Said if I do A, do B, do C, when I do all these things, I'm gonna be okay. That's what he said. And he gave it to his friend. He said, now I want you to check it for me and make sure that I'm on the right track. And his friend checked it and came back and said, you missed one. And Benjamin Franklin said, what did I miss? He said, because you're not humble. Your ego got in the way and you're not humble. And Benjamin Franklin said, what do you mean I'm not humble? Yes, I am humble. He said, no, because you always got to be right. You can never be wrong. And Benjamin Franklin understood that as a weakness and accepted it. And wrote about it in his biography, autobiography. But the point we're making is that sometimes we ourselves get in the way and think we know it all, rather than getting assistance when we need it. Primarily through prayer from God, but to others as well. But we got to, because once we started putting our pride in the way, we began to lose our relationship with God. And then that ego begins edging God out. That I'm important, God is not so important. We can't do that. We cannot do that. We have to be careful how we do that. And then the third thing that we do sometimes is we listen to others. Now, let me be very clear. I believe, strongly believe, and strongly encourage that each one of you should have someone in your corner. You need to have somebody that you can talk to and ask a question and make sure you get a good answer. Get the right answer. May not be the answer you want, but the person gives you the right answer. But sometimes we put people around us who don't do that. Sometimes we want people around us who are only going to tell us yes when we want to do something. They're never going to say you shouldn't do it. They're never going to question what you're doing. They're always going to agree. But that's the kind of person we really don't want around us. Okay, now, and understand, Christ had an inner circle. I'm suggesting you need to have an inner circle. Then develop that inner circle now. Don't wait 10 years from now or 5 years from now. Develop your inner circle now. With the technology that we have today, your inner circle does not need to change. But find people around you who are prayerful, have the same values, love you, and love you enough to tell you when you're wrong. Love you enough to tell you when you are wrong. Because there's other people who say they love you, don't really love you if all they're doing is agreeing with whatever you want to do. If you go to someone and say, I think God's telling me to do this, and that person says, if I were you, I wouldn't, then you got a problem. The person says, if I were you, no matter what it is, you should run away. Find someone who's gonna say, let me pray with you. Let's look in the Bible and see what the Bible says. Because the Bible has an answer for everything. There's never a question that the Bible can't answer. So find somebody that's going to help you look in the Bible and say, okay, yes, that is biblically correct, go for it. Or it's biblically not correct and don't go forward. But a lot of times we put the wrong people around us. We put the wrong people around us. So we listen to the wrong voices. And when we listen to the wrong voices, we're not submitting to the instructions of God. We are submitting to to our own wishes, which is not good. Which is not good. Okay. How does submitting to God make life so much easier? How does submitting to God makes life it makes it so much easier? It helps us to make better decisions. You know, life is made up of decisions. We make thousands of decisions every day, from what clothes we're gonna wear, what we're gonna eat, what direction we're gonna take when we go from point A to point B, who we're gonna smile to, who we're not gonna smile to, how we're gonna talk to someone, how we're not gonna talk to someone, how we're gonna answer someone. You know, multitude of decisions that need to be made every day. And some of them seem not important, some of them seem very important. But the fact of the matter is that when we submit to God, then all of those decisions become important because they become to be God-like. And so it becomes easy to make a decision because you're using the foundation of God to help you make that decision. And next is that it removes the temptation of sin. It removes the temptation of sin because we all are tempted. But when we read the model prayer, it says, Lord, lead me not into temptation. So I want to remove myself from the temptation. I don't want, see, some people say, I'm okay, I'm strong, I'm a good Christian. I would never do that. So they put themselves in a position of being tempted. I don't want to be tempted because I'm weak. All right. And I'm afraid that I'm going to fall where I shouldn't fall. So let me put God in my life in such a way that I'm not tempted. I'm not tempted. I'm not going to go somewhere where I'm going to be tempted. I'm going to make decisions about what to do and where to go that removes the possibility of the temptation of sin. When we submit to God, that's what we do. We remove ourselves from that temptation, that potential temptation. This verse reminds us of the importance of relying on God's wisdom and guidance in our life. Relying is a strong word. Not if, not sometimes, always relying on God's wisdom and guidance in our life. That's what we have to do if we're going to follow God's commandments. Isaiah 58, 11 and 12. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in the sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose water never fails. And then it goes on in verse 12. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. And we're going to come back to talk about verse 12 in a minute, because, you know, the first part of verse 11, I kind of got it fairly easily. But verse 12, I got kind of stuck on it. Wasn't quite sure what it meant. So I started off with saying, why is it important to have a guide? Say, God is our guide. Well, the guide knows where the dangers lie. When you go into a country that you don't know anything about, you want a guide. You want somebody who knows where not to go. That's what you want. And then you want someone who knows what to do when the danger does appear. That's a guide. I remember I went to Ethiopia, and we were handing out polio vaccination. And we took a side trip with our guide, and we were riding down the road, and all of a sudden these guys came up on camels and stopped us. And they looked ferocious. I mean, we were afraid. Okay? And we haven't taken pictures. And the guy came up and talked to the guide. And he spoke in a language that we didn't know, we weren't familiar with. And the guy then talked to him and told him what we were doing. And what we were not trying to do anything wrong. And the guy said, so give us some money for our pictures. So we paid the guy for the right to take their pictures. And again, it ended up being kind of comical, but it was dangerous. But without the guide, we wouldn't have known what to do because we didn't even know the language. that the person was using. This passage conveys the message that when we align ourselves with God's will and live according to his principles, he will provide for us, empower us, and use us to bring healing and restoration to our surroundings. Now that's back to verse 12. Okay, is that we're not here just for ourselves. We're here to make a difference in the lives of people around us. And you cannot make a difference in the lives of people around you when you don't submit to God's will. If you're not strong and courageous, you can't make a difference in the lives of others around us. And that's what we are supposed to be about. That's what that verse 12 is trying to tell us. We all have life-changing decisions to make. We should live a life in fear of we can live a life of fear and making mistakes and choosing what the world may say is the safest route. That's an option. Not a good option, but that's an option. We can submit to God and follow him, which is a better option. And we can live a life of courage and knowing that God is in control and we need not worry. God is always in control and we need not worry. And it took me a while to really, really understand that, because sometimes I've been in a situation and I get all antsy and don't know what to do. And I stop worrying. And then I catch myself and say, wait a minute, don't worry. God is in control. Be happy. Always praising God for wherever I am. And so this verse encourages us to be strong, courageous, trust in God's guidance, and live in obedience to his commandments. With faith in God, we can overcome any challenges. We make wise decisions and experience his blessings in our lives. And that's what we want. We all say we want God's blessing. Bless you, bless. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that, again, going back to what we said earlier, that certain things have to be in place to receive those blessings. And they have to be strong and courageous. And you cannot be strong and courageous if you're not dependent upon God. If you're dependent upon yourself, then it's probably not the wisest thing to do. Now, I know the world talks about depending upon ourselves and thinking for ourselves and all those kinds of things, but that's not the way that God says. It's not the way that God says. God says, depend on him, and he will never leave us nor forsake you. Graduates, congratulations again. You have done marvelous work. You have crossed your Jordan, and now you're on the other side of Jordan. But understanding that on being on the other side of Jordan means that you got to be strong and you got to be courageous. And you can never be frightened or dismayed. For the Lord God is with you wherever you go. Carry the Bible with you, meditate on it every day, and all of God's blessings will be bestowed upon you. Oh, God has so much in store for you. All he says is just follow me and keep my commandments. Just that simple. Thank you very much for your time. Anybody got any questions? Please ask, comments. Any questions or comments? Okay, well, I appreciate it as always. Blessings to each one of you.